Hi, I'm Charlotte Rose, and I'm here today to talk to a bunch of actors from the movie The Bonesetter's Daughter. Now, can you tell me a little bit about the movie? Basically, this movie is based around the story of Ruth, and her mother leaves behind this story about her childhood, and Ruth goes through this journey of self-discovery about who she really is as a person of Asian heritage, of Chinese heritage, of wife and of daughter. So the main character's name is Rose, correct? Do you mind telling me a bit more about her? What kind of challenges does she face in her life? Ruth faces quite a few challenges as a mother and as a daughter, but the main points of the story are the story behind Lu Ling and her past and her dementia, and the relationship between Ruth and Art. You see, Ruth and Art are having troubles because Ruth is so preoccupied with wanting to take care of Lu Ling, and she can't because she also has a family to take care of. And the issue with Art is that she's so preoccupied with her mother and her job and other things that she doesn't have time to pay attention to Art. And in the meantime, Art's ex-wife is still able to pay attention to and love him in a way that she has yet to figure out how to do. What is the relationship between Ruth and Art? Ruth and Art have kind of a tumultuous relationship in the beginning of the movie. And this is mostly due to the fact that Ruth is uncomfortable with staying at home because she can't keep an eye on her mother, Lu Ling, who has developing dementia. And Ruth focuses on this fact a lot because she comes to visit Lu Ling and she'll find rotten food or that she's left the faucet running for days or maybe even weeks on end. And this just doesn't bode well for Ruth and her mother because it's unsafe. How does Lu Ling affect Ruth and Art's relationship? Ruth and Art grow distant during the time that Ruth worries about other things, such as Art's ex-wife, Miriam, and her mother and her developing dementia. So Ruth tends to focus on these things more than focusing on hers and Art's relationship, and it causes a lot of distance between them. Art and Ruth are extremely close to each other, but they also have this distance of being afraid to actually talk to each other and discuss problems in their life and what might be bothering them. And this becomes a barrier when it comes to Art's ex-wife, Miriam, whom is kind of taking over in Ruth's mind. Instead of her being Art's wife, Miriam is still Art's wife in her mind. So at the end of the novel, Ruth and Art kind of mend things. Art figures out how to send Lu Ling to an assisted living home, and in turn this gives them more time together, and it makes it so that they become closer as a couple and they fall in love with each other all over again. He even calls the date that he takes Ruth out on their first date. And so they start the relationship all over again to find out why they really fell in love. Art becomes a lot more endearing towards Ruth once he realizes that Ruth has kind of been holding back because of all these troubles in her life. So he comes up with ways to take care of Lu Ling by putting her in an assisted living home and by not really mentioning Miriam anymore, and just becoming physically closer to Ruth. And in this way, he kind of fixes the distance between Ruth and himself. What is Lu Ling and Ruth's relationship here in this story? Ruth and Lu Ling's current relationship is very conflicted, seeing as Ruth grew up as an American child and Lu Ling grew up as a Chinese daughter, wife, meant to bring honor. And this causes a lot of conflict between the two because Ruth has adapted to American society and her mother still hasn't. And so it becomes this strange conflict of whenever Ruth does something kind or good for Lu Ling, she doesn't quite understand because it's not what she would have done to show affection or caring, because her way of showing affection or caring is through insults. This is a big issue for Ruth, that Lu Ling never says that she's sorry and is constantly insulting Ruth. But when we actually go into Lu Ling's past, we learn that it is seen as a way of saying that one loves another person when they insult them or correct them on something, because it is seen as correcting you to become a better person or a better wife. Ruth discovers that all the insults that her mother ever threw at her, all of the striving for Ruth to be the very best and always making Ruth do homework and yelling at her for doing things, it always turned out to be just Lu Ling's way of saying, I love you. But, of course, Ruth as a child never saw this. She only saw her mother being rude and mean and never being sorry for it. There's a very significant point in Ruth's childhood that she somehow manages to make this connection to Precious Auntie, or at least Lu Ling believes. And so, for days on end, Lu Ling would make Ruth sit down at the table and write in Chinese characters trying to decrypt what Precious Auntie is trying to say to Lu Ling, because Lu Ling is so incredibly sorry for all the things that she didn't do for Precious Auntie until she knew that she was her mother. Now, who is this Precious Auntie figure? Precious Auntie is like a maternal spiritual deity to Lu Ling, that she will follow whatever this supposed Precious Auntie says to the ends of the earth, even to the point of trying to commit suicide, which turned out to just be a ploy by Ruth when she was a small, rebellious child. But this Precious Auntie figure also kind of causes some torment for Lu Ling, in a way that Lu Ling, instead of listening to her birth mother, decided to marry into the Chang family and caused Precious Auntie to commit suicide because of it, because the Chang family had actually murdered her husband and her father and her mother. Precious Auntie's story starts back in her childhood, watching her father, the Bonesetter, which is where the movie's title comes from, fix up people's ailments. He fixed many ailments, but his priority was bones, considering his skill with it. The other meaning behind bones, however, was along the lines of the fact that the people in Precious Auntie's town would go hunting for oracle bones or dragon bones, and these were highly magical in their eyes, and this became kind of a small pinpoint yet a huge circling point in this story about bones and bone setting and ancient medicine, and how it kind of based Precious Auntie and then Lu Ling's life into what they became. Precious Auntie is kind of a ghost of Lu Ling's life, and it becomes a very special moment in the story when it is found that Ruth is supposedly able to contact Precious Auntie through writing Chinese calligraphy, and this brings Lu Ling a lot of closure in the way that she can finally talk to her precious auntie and explain herself and say sorry for all the things that were never said or done for precious auntie, and apologize for causing her suicide. Tell me a little bit about this secret past of Luling's. Luling begins to about 7 or 8 years before the story actually takes place. She begins to write down this record of her past, of her childhood, of how she became an orphan, of how she got married and moved to America. And Ruth never really kept up with her Chinese culture, so she needed this story to be interpreted for her. But when she does, it's absolutely life-changing, and it teaches her so many lessons on how to be a daughter, on how to be a wife. And it's a huge breakthrough, and I feel like it's a lesson that we can all learn from, that we can always be better. Ruth feels like she had a very rough childhood with Luling, but as the story behind Luling's childhood and past is revealed, it turns out that this harsh childhood was nothing compared to the abandonment of a family, or being forced to marry into a family, or having your own mother commit suicide because she doesn't want you to marry into a family. Luling has this sister, Gowling, in this story, that basically she holds the secrets that Ruth has never asked about. So if Ruth had just asked about Luling's past, or why she might have had these problems with dementia, Gowling probably would have been able to answer them all for Ruth. Towards the end of the movie, Ruth also comes to Gowling to kind of talk about the secrets that Luling has kept from her. And Gowling turns out to have just known this the entire time, and was completely open to telling it to Ruth if only she had just asked, or if Ruth had just asked her to translate the pages that Luling had written for her. However, Ruth didn't want to go to her because she felt that Gowling would be angry about what Luling wrote about her, or would translate it in a sense that wasn't particularly flattering towards Luling. You mentioned that majority of the women in this film are Asian. Does this present any social hierarchies or discriminations in their life? Luling is kind of seen as the batty old lady in this film because of the fact that she's getting older, and because of her hidden past that she has, some of the things that she says are a little distorted, such as the fact that she's actually 5 years older than she says she is. It's also an issue when it comes to the fact that she says that Precious Auntie is her mother, and as far as Ruth knows, Luling's mother is the same mother that Gowling possesses. Well, that certainly seems like a very inspirational tale to read. I suggest that you all go and read the book or see the movie in theaters. Thank you, and until next time, I'm Charlotte Rose.